So many people focus on the way that movies are affecting the way we write books, but not as many people focus on the way that video games are affecting how we write books. In general, I think most people vastly underestimate the way that video games is affecting storytelling inside novels. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at 7 foundational plot structures that video games use and then figure out how we can adapt them and employ them for purposes of writing novels. And yes, you can use all 7 of these techniques even if your book has nothing to do with video games. They're just sort of foundational principles that we're borrowing from video games. So let's get started with number 1, level up sequence. So over the course of your novel, how is your main character growing in status? How are they getting more important? How are they getting to a new stage? So let's look at a book example like Ready Player One. When Wade meets Artemis for the first time, he is level 10 and she is level 50. And then over the course of the book, they grind together, they rise through the ranks until finally they reach the maximum level of power, level 99. Their stats increase, and they're also famous because everyone in the world can see that they're at the absolute top of the food chain. Now, you might say like, oh, John, that's for like, a book which is very much a video game style book. I'm not writing that style book. Okay, wait, hold on. Let's look at Old Man's War by John Scalzi. This is about a 75-year-old who signs up for an intergalactic war in order to get a new body, like the body of a 20-year-old. And throughout the course of this book, he really rises through the ranks. Starts as a grunt, then rises to squadron leader, and then lieutenant, and then up to captain, and then the only trueborn leader in the Ghost Squad, which is like this elite fighting force. So this is more of a sci-fi military type book, but what we see is we see the character growing in status over time. He's getting more and more accolades. He's getting ranked higher and higher. Now, in your book, something that you can do is structure your chapters around these status changes. So every time this person, your main character, gets promoted to the next status, you'll end the chapter with them on that high point and then start the new chapter on their next journey at this new level. Overall, I think the main takeaway here is that you want your main character growing in power and influence over the course of your book, and that should be really visible and visibly marked in certain stages or status upgrades. The second thing that I think all novelists could learn from video games would be skill trees. In your novel, you want your character to be gaining in new abilities over the course of your book. So at the end of the story, they have a lot more abilities than they do at the beginning of your story. Now, you can see this really clearly in books like Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Vin, the main character, progressively learns allomancy, which is this magic-based system of manipulating metals. And she goes all the way from iron all the way up to bronze, and then finally to the god level iron element, which is atium. And obviously, as she gains each new ability to wield this iron magic, she employs it in the story, right? To get through a certain obstacle in the story. You can see this sort of logic of improving skills in something like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein too. The creature begins with just pure sensory chaos, like all he knows is light and sound, and then he graduates to starting to hear language and understand spoken language, and then graduates from there to be able to actually read. Then he finds 3 books, and each one of these books teach him something about the world and enable him to better navigate this world. So he learns about morality and human emotions and also just existence in general. And then on the basis of that skills and that learning, he is able to better navigate his world. So the first point in this video was more about having your character level up in terms of status, while this second point is more about leveling up your character in terms of abilities. And I really do think that no matter what genre that you're writing, that you can take these types of principles and work them into the fabric of your structure. And hey, in Bookfox Lab, which is my coaching program for writers, we teach writers a lot of different storytelling frameworks and structures that you can use for your book. We are currently accepting applicants for the next cohort, which is starting next month. So now would be a great time to apply. I'm going to put the link in the description so you can check it out. The next foundational structure that we see in a lot of video games, which I think can definitely help novelists, is number 3, collectibles and special objects. So I think collectibles and special objects play a really important role in most video game logic. A lot of the time you need to gain an object before you get entrance to the next stage of the journey. Or maybe even the whole video game is structured on collecting a bunch of different objects, which then result in you winning the game. And we see this sort of pattern happen in a lot of books as well. I mean, think about Harry Potter hunting those 7 Horcruxes, or there's those loot boxes in Dungeon Crawler Carl. Sometimes you even see mystery objects that the character will find, but they don't quite know what sort of power or ability it gives them. them. Like in Ready Player One, he finds this undroppable quarter, but he's not quite sure what it does. So if you want to use this technique in your novel, I think the way that we see these objects play out in video games is the objects always enable your character to do something. It always gives them some sort of power or opens up a door to a next area. Like in Ready Player One, that undroppable quarter gives him the power of having an extra life. And by the way, if you want to think more about how to incorporate objects into your novel, in the next video, I actually have a whole video talking about how to use objects well in your story. I give lots of examples. It's a fantastic video. So subscribe if you're not already to make sure that you hit it. The fourth thing that writers can learn from video games is progressively more difficult challenges. So in video games, there's a lot of completing quests or figuring out puzzles. Now, I know perfectly well that this isn't a uniquely video game format. I mean, I think back to like Greek literature, Odysseus and the Odyssey. He was outwitting the sirens and tricking the Cyclops and going through a series of obstacles and puzzles in order to make it back to his goal of reaching home. But I do think that video games have organized the series of challenges and puzzles in a much more sophisticated way. They've just leaned into it a little bit harder. So let's look at a series like Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is a series that's structured around 18 tiered floors with escalating difficulties, obstacles, safe rooms, bosses. And book one is actually just getting through floor number 1 and 2. But we see stuff like boss battles and ticking clocks of collapsible floors, and also the challenge of finding stairwell keys. So if you want to use this sort of logic in your book, one, I would say you need to be really careful to make sure that the difficulties are escalating. Every single stage of your book needs to feel a little bit harder than the last stage. And honestly, video games are really good at making sure every single level feels just a little bit harder, just escalating it a little bit more. The second thing you need to do is to make sure there's good variation. In other words, make sure that every single new challenge or quest or obstacle or, puzzle is a little bit different in some way than the previous one. And Dungeon Crawler Carl actually does a great job with this, varying stuff from, goblins attacking all the way to this whole complex labyrinth of subway systems. And a third thing you need to do to use this in your book is to make sure that when your hero completes the challenge or wins the puzzle or whatever it is, to make sure that they get access to the next stage or the next level of the journey. It should open a doorway. It should give them access to the next part. That ensures there's a kind of reward system for your character, which is yet another thing that video games do really well, is saying, look, here's the challenge, and when you complete it, you win this. The next thing that novelists can learn from video games is number 5, give a quest. So quests aren't unique to lit RPGs, but I do think they are essential to the genre. Just like in video games, you often see the whole structure of a book organized around a quest. Let's look at He Who Fights with Monsters by Travis Deberell. You might know him by his pen name Shirtaloon. The main character Jason has a whole bunch of quests that he needs to fulfill or complete, such as clearing out a whole bunch of lesser monsters. And honestly, you can build an entire book around a series of small little quests that leads up to fulfilling the main quest of the book. We see a lot of quest logic in novels like Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Strange has very specific objectives in this book, like retrieving his enchanted wife, curing Lady Pole, and finding the Raven King. So you might be asking yourself, okay, John, how are quests different when they are inspired by video games rather than being just like run-of-the-mill literature type quests? And the answer I would give to that is that they tend to be more formalized. They are a very explicit, system-driven task, and there is a very clear premise, like you have to do this, and a very clear reward system. You will earn this once you complete this quest. If you're tired of writing advice that all sounds the same, hey, you should subscribe to this channel because I do my very best to give a lot of variety in what I teach and also to go beyond sort of the basics that you've heard 100 times. If you are already a subscriber, thank you. And also please like the video. I nearly didn't put this next one in the video, but I think it's a really fun point, and it is number 6, game-like controls. So what I've been seeing more frequently in storytelling is that sometimes the hero or the villain will be controlling another force through very video game-like controls. And for an example of this, look at the latest Superman movie, where Lex Luthor is controlling this clone of Superman called Ultraman, and the way he's controlling him is by shouting out what sounds very much like video game controls. A1, H45, and Ultraman responds to these verbal commands by like executing the punch or the kick or the spin or the pile drive that corresponds to that letter and that number. The advantage of having Lex Luthor control this other character is that it still ensures that Lex Luthor feels like the top villain, you know, he's sort of the ultimate villain that Superman's gonna have to defeat. Otherwise, you know, Ultraman would take over and sort of become the main villain. It also gives Lex Luthor something to do. So he is not a passive character, but an actual active character controlling this fight against Superman. So the way to use this in your book is simply to have a controller character and a controlled character. And this doesn't have to be like a robot or anything like that, although it could be, but any character who is speaking into, say, like an earpiece of another character, telling them what to do, is giving off sort of a video game vibe of the person controlling the action and the avatar who is doing the action. And now for our final point, you are gonna like this one. It is number 7, respawning. So a stalwart, tried and true function of video games is respawning. So when you die in a level, what do? You go back to the beginning of the level, you try it again. You get a new life and you get another chance. And so basically there's this cycle of failing and trying again. And no matter what you write, I do think that you can use that kind of structure in your book. So let's look at a few examples. I'm thinking of Blake Crouch. You might know him from Dark Matter, which got turned into that popular series, but he also wrote a book called Recursion. In Recursion, they create this device to go back in people's memories and essentially go back in time. But when they go back in time, things go wrong, and so they keep going back in time to try to fix those things. Another example might be Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise, how he keeps on dying in the war and then coming back to before the war and then going through and trying it again. Now, yes, those are both sci-fi examples, but if you're not writing a book with, you know, time travel in it, as many of you I'm sure are not, you can still use this structure. Basically have a character fail at a task, reset, and try again. And having a montage where they try that many, many times, well, it emphasizes how difficult this task is. It gives them something to work towards. And when they finally do achieve it, the reader will be like, oh man, like, I'm so happy for you. It'll create this great endorphin boost for the reader. Hey, just a reminder that you don't have to do this writing life alone. Check out the BookFox Lab link in the description below because I'd love to walk alongside you in your book and help you out with it. So please check that out. And as always, I hope these tips and techniques and structures were helpful for you as you're trying to figure out how to write your book. All of these principles are things that you can use in your book no matter what genre you're writing. And thanks for watching this video. I appreciate you. Happy writing.